I know it sounds cliche, but going to your past and trying to figure out these moments and to figure out what the meaning of these memories that I have. And like, because, you don't remember everything in your life. You only remember certain things. So why did you remember those things? There must be a reason.
Right.
When you can figure out what that reason is, it's like everything just kind of like falls into place. And it's just like, wow. And I told her, how it literally changed me.
You're listening to Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Michael Jamin. I'm here with Phil. Fill her up with premium Hudson. You gotta always have a good name for him. And today we're talking about screenwriting fallacies depicted in film and TV. Because someone asked me, I made a post a while ago and about how how we're depicted very differently, how writers are depicted on TV and how it's not really the way it works. And some guy's like, well, I don't understand why you'd be depicted that way. If assume, a writer probably depicted it. So why would you depict yourself wrong? I'm like, well, that's a good point. Maybe we'll talk about that. So I guess it all started with this, Phil. I did a post and about how many times you've seen on TV or film, you see like a scene where a writer's on the phone with his agent saying, I got nothing left in the tank, Harry. I'm blocked. I'm completely blocked. And then, the agent is like, oh, don't worry. I'll be right over, don't jump off a bridge or anything. I'll be right there. When, in real life, first of all, in real life, you would never complain to your agent that way. And then secondly, they would tell you to jump off a bridge. They don't care. They'd let you jump. So, because the deal is you would never, I don't know any working writer, at least at my level or below, who would ever call to tell their agent that they can't do the job.
Yeah.
Because then you can't do the job. They're going to say, okay, I'll find someone who can. Right. Then you're out of work for the rest of your life.
Now, I have to imagine there is some level of friendship developed over years. I know I've talked to some of the showrunners when the Writers Guild was basically required everyone to fire their agents.
Yeah.
They said, this was tough. He's the godfather to my children. He's been a friend of mine since college. There's a level of friendship at a certain level, but in general, I think what you're really saying is these are professional relationships, and the professional relationship extends as far as, are you able to help me continue to improve my business?
Yeah. But not only that, I guess there are some people who have those relationships with their agents. I don't know, more often than not, I hear an agent maybe dropping a client. They don't really have much loyalty to their clients because it's a business, you may think you're best friends, but I think you're kidding yourself. And maybe, in the case of somebody who went to school with somebody, maybe it's a little different, but I don't know. I just would never do that. I don't know anybody who would talk to. I imagine there are really high level writers, big shots who make so much money for studios and agencies that their agents will jump over hoops, flaming hoops to help them out.
Yeah.
But those people didn't get to where they are by being, so insecure to begin with. They didn't get to where they are by being blocked. They were, they churn it out,
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's it's interesting. And I know why writers depict themselves that way, so I kind of addressed that. It's just, it's funny because, well, first of all, Phil, the job of screenwriter it's not fun to watch. It's not fun to watch me do my job.
Yeah. And I would say that most new writers or people starting out are inclined to write about their experience. Mm-hmm. And that is as writers. And is some neuroticism and some stress that comes from putting yourself and your emotions on the page and being vulnerable. And so, film school, most of the things that I saw being made were about writers. I'm a writer, or I'm a young filmmaker, a lot of the
how interesting my life is. That's what it is. It's kind of narcissistic. It's look how interesting I am. Let me write about myself.
Yeah. And even a lot of the scripts that I'm seeing from people in other writers groups that I've been in, there are a lot of that's about a girl who went to Hollywood and struck out on her own to make it as a writer, and the struggles she had on that path. And it's sitting at a keyboard is not a very engaging thing to watch. And I think that there are only a few cases of that I think might be interesting. So Barton Fink comes to mind.
Right.
And then I'd say the other one is adaptation, right?
Right.
Which Charlie Kaufman, it's good stuff. So I don't know how you do it better than those
Well, and Charlie Kaufman, I mean, that was about his evil twin. I mean,
Yeah.
it was so uninteresting. He had to invent some like science fiction version of an evil twin. And I love that movie, by the way.
Yeah, it's
But
great.
but I don't mean to knock, like I get why people do write, your friends are in film school. I get why they write about themselves, because you're always told to write what you know.
Uh-huh.
But as a rule, like if you were to watch me do my job during the day, the screenwriting part of the job is just me sitting at a keyboard typing. It's not interesting or fun. The part, like I'm a writer producer, so the producer part is actually more fun to watch, not the writing part. The producer part is basically me, the casting, editing, dealing with the light, dealing with the director and the camera works, and all those kind of those are kind of fun things, like running a writer's room, breaking a story. That might be fun to watch me do, but that's a producer stuff.
Right.
Like the actual writing stuff is pretty boring. And so, which is why, writing is a very creative job. So when you write it, sometimes you'll see a script or, a TV show or whatever, and there'll be a surrogate for screenwriter. It'll be advertising executive or architect. Architect's a big one. I'm an architect, which really means screenwriter, because it's like those are more visually interesting to watch. Someone in advertising or in architecture, because you can look at something, but a screenwriter is pretty boring to look at. But and then to answer this, the question that guy had, which was why do writers depict themselves, these relationships with their agents, if that's not exactly how it goes down? Well, like let's say you're writing a movie and your main character is a screenwriter. Every main character needs a sounding board, needs someone to tell their problem to. And so it could be the next door neighbor, but the next door neighbor doesn't really care. And then, he'll say, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear about your problem. Well, good luck figuring it out." But if the screenwriter were to share that problem with their agent, like that's a really fun, interesting dynamic, because the agent's not going to give you the straight answer. They're going to, they have a vested interest to keep that character working, because that's the money, that's how they make money. So they want to keep that cash cow pumping out scripts. And so the agent has a conflict of interest. The agent's not going to give the writer good advice. They're going to give advice to keep the writer writing. And so that's fun to watch. It's really interesting, even though that dynamic isn't entirely true. It's a fun dynamic to portray on TV and in film.
Right. And I think it's interesting because it's something that you've talked about. And, even in the copywriting world and e-commerce and marketing and advertising, they talk about, don't write in the passive voice, be active. And you say you should write in the passive voice because dialogue is passive, right? You're beating around the bush. You're not hitting it on the head.
Oh, I don't say passive. No, I don't really say that. I say indirectly.
Indirectly, excuse me.
There's writing directly versus writing indirectly.
Excuse me. Yeah. So there's a great clarification. So the direct approach is, come on, man, you need to do this because I need money. Like I've got to pay for my alimony to my wife and my child support. Instead, it's like, no, man, you've got this because, you're the greatest, you're the best. And think about what you did here and there. And they're just not talking about the real, the genesis for their interest in the writer writing. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it creates that dynamic of, we all know that this other person has a different outcome they're looking for, which is to cash a check.
Right. And so like that agent has a conflict of interest, and that should make your spidey senses tingle, because conflict is what you want for when you're writing comedy or drama. You want so conflict of interest is good. It makes it's interesting to watch, and it's more fun. So that's why there are certain. And I was trying to think of and why else we like watching, like why else writers enjoy watching writers on TV get abused. It's schadenfreude. It's fun to watch that, because I think we all get abused by whoever's paying us, the network, the studio, whatever. So it's fun to watch someone else going through what we go through. So which is why we create writer characters who get abused, because I think that's kind of isn't that funny? But when I think of the shows that depict writers, I think of like the Larry Sanders Show, which was not sitcom, but it was late night, and I always enjoyed watching that as a young writer, thinking, oh man, so is that what it's like? And it kind of is. It was always about the writers in that room. They wanted to get off the project. They always had a screenplay they're working on or a TV show they're trying to sell. They were never happy being joke writers on the Larry Sanders Show. And I think that's accurate. I think no matter where you are as a writer, you're never happy. You always want to be doing something different because someone else is doing something different or better, whether it's movies or whatever. And there was a show, you probably don't remember this, but called The Jackie Thomas Show. Do you remember that one?
No, I had.
It was Tom Arnold. This is back probably mid 1990s. Tom Arnold had a show. It didn't last very long, but it was about, he was like a raging lunatic TV star. He as the character he played, and the writers had to deal with him. And I just loved that. And, the rule of thumb though in Hollywood is you're never going to sell a show about Hollywood. Hollywood doesn't like buying shows about Hollywood.
Right.
So that's why there's so few movies and shows about screenwriting and about, because it becomes very incestuous. And I don't think it's odd. Hollywood doesn't think that most of America or middle America really cares about how we make the sausage.
Right.
But I kind of think they do. I think it's interesting. I think that's why people listen to this podcast. So
yeah. And we've had, thank you to everyone listening, because we've seen pretty explosive growth just in the first several episodes that we've had out.
Yeah, it's been nice. Yeah.
And lots of great comments and feedback from people. But I do think people care. I think that, film and television give us the opportunity to leave our circumstances wherever we are. And so if we're daydreaming in Tupelo, Oklahoma, right, or we're in, Tupelo, Mississippi, we're thinking of something other than the oil field we're working in, or the retail store we're working at, or the accounting job we have, where it's an escape. And most people think they have a good idea for a screenplay. Most people think that they have something that their life is interesting enough to be in a TV show. I can't tell you how often I get a text like, "Oh, you should make a movie about my life. It's so crazy." It's like, no, your life's a mess. Like, it's a dumpster fire. It's not necessarily interesting.
Or I hear that a lot too. You should hear my office place. You should make a show about my office place. And then I was like, oh yeah. And then they'll say, well, you had to be there. Yeah. Well, this guy, he says the craziest things. Okay, what does he say? I can't even think of any.
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, come back to me when you can.
Yeah. So I think people do care. And I think, I think one of the short-lived Aaron Sorkin projects, which was Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip.
Yeah.
I bought the box set. I watched every single episode. I mean, to this day, they're one of the Christmas episodes, is one of the most emotional television episodes I've ever watched, like tears every time I've watched it, because it was that touching. And, it's about late night comedy and effectively like a fake SNL.
Right.
And I loved it. And I had that interest, and all my friends loved it too, who were not necessarily interested in writing. So I do think people care, but I also think, we're looking at it from inside the magic lamp, if you will. Right.
But I think that's why why that show didn't do well in the ratings, because I guess people didn't care, or they didn't, maybe there were a lot of reasons, but that might've been one of them. Didn't care. But even when you go back to like the Dick Van Dyke Show, he was a comedy writer on that, but you don't really remember that, because it was really a family show. That was his work setting, and he had these three, or we had these two coworkers with him, and they were it was more like office stuff. They weren't really talking about the show so much,
Right, which is something we could all relate to in America at the time, was the emerging office issues.
Yeah, but it's just interesting, because it's interesting to hear what people think my job is versus what it actually is. So
well, we've got an episode we're going to talk about what is the job of a showrunner, which I'm actually excited to dive into.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about that. And again, that's more the interesting stuff, is the producing stuff, the writer producer part. In theory, I get two separate paychecks, even though it's all one. It's the writing part and the producing part. So
right. Well, how do you marry that idea? And maybe we're a little too early for some of my questions, but you mentioned that young writers tend to write about themselves because we're told, write what you know.
Right.
And to a certain degree, when you're 20 years old or 18 years old and you haven't really lived much of a life outside of high school sports or drama or working at a fast food restaurant, it's who you are as an identity as a writer, and you're putting all of your effort and energy into it. So that's what you know. So how would I have my ideas on this, but how do you marry that idea of writing what you know when you are younger and you only think of yourself as a writer?
Because my daughter's taking writing classes, so I'm always very happy to help her, and she's like, because she loves my writing, and she's like, oh, I love that, I want to write like that. And I've read some of her stuff, and she doesn't feel like she's old enough to have any experiences, but she's off at college, and then she met up with her high school friends again. And she just came home, she started telling me about the awkwardness of it, and how, how people kind of grow at that age, you grow apart, you grow so fast, and they kind of grown apart a little bit. And she saw everyone through a new lens, and I'm sure they saw her through a different lens, but they kept on talking about the past because that was the one common thing. And I go, that's so interesting. And I go, that's a story right there. And she didn't realize that because she's too close to it. She's in it.
That sounds like a Sundance pick for sure, like that, because it's that emerging adulthood, which is a big thing that's happening, is how do relationships change as we get older and experience our own things.
Yeah.
And it's universal.
And it's a small little story. I mean, you can do it, like if you were to write a small little, like if you had to write a short, you'd want to write a small story. You wouldn't want to write a short about the world blowing up with dinosaurs chasing each other. Like, how are you going to shoot that?
Yeah.
You're going to shoot 4 people at a dining room table, that at a dinner table. That would be easy to do a show, short about.
Yeah, as opposed to when I was in film school and it was the height of The Walking Dead, and every other project that came out was about zombies, and every other project was about young struggling writers.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah.
Those were the two things that we saw.
It's interesting.
To the point, by the way, that my teachers limited the project length to 3 minutes because they didn't want to sit through a bunch of really bad stuff.
I don't blame them, but it's almost impossible to tell a decent story in 3 minutes. I really think.
I think a good note I got, not that I tout myself as a good writer back then or even now. I think I'm a decent writer and getting better. But my final project, I had to cut it down to that 3 minute mark. And afterwards, my teacher pulled me aside and he said, yeah, I think this deserves to be the 12 minutes because I'd written a 12-page script. It's like, and I hope you understand the compliment that is, because it had story. And props to you for giving me those early lessons about story. And I'll say, I had a younger writer who listens to our podcast. He reached out to me on Instagram and he just asked me a bunch of questions. And he was not getting this subject of that writing is really just being able to tell a story. And what is a story? And I kept asking him, and he kept talking about world building. And it's about, I love building these worlds. I love doing this. It's like, yeah, because that's not writing. That's fantasy. You're building this world, and it's beating around the bush of writing. It's fake work. And that's what I was thinking. I couldn't tell him that. And I kept subtly kind of hinting at it. And then finally I was like, go back to Michael's free video on story. And trust me, that video is so valuable. You could replay it 3 or 4 times and pick up a lot of info. And he was like, oh, I didn't know he had a free thing. And I was like, yeah, go to Michael's social media. And anyone listening right now, if you haven't, go sign up for the free lesson. It's the first lesson in your course. And it in and of itself is so valuable. It helped me stand out in film school because I was talking about story structure, even if my story wasn't necessarily as refined and polished as it could be and is today.
Yeah. Where is that? That's at michaeljamin.com/course. That's where
I think it's /free.
michaeljamin.com/free. Go there and you can download that and it'll definitely be helpful. But yeah, it's like, I get what he's saying about, like, if you were to do a show or a movie that takes place in a diner. Okay, so everyone in that diner is the world. It's like you got the cook, the chef, or whatever, the waitress, the sassy waitress, the regular guy, and the 4 people who eat the bread. So that's the world of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder, I mean, I guess you're building a world, but that's not really
Right.
That's not really what you're doing.
My note to him was that, there's a certain point where, at least this is how I feel now. And this, you might look at that as this is a very simple view as a young writer, because I still view myself as that. But there comes a point where it kind of clicks, where you say, oh, I'm not putting people in an interesting world. I'm building an interesting world around my people because it accentuates and improves upon or builds the tension of that is going on with those characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like their world. So let's take The Walking Dead as an example, because that's the subject of many student films. Well, if you look at that first season, it's really about a man who was in a coma and wakes up in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. And then he has to reunite with his family, only to find out that his wife has basically moved on with his best friend because they thought he was dead. And it's about the tensions of effectively a family that's been separated, and separation in family, and divorce, and the struggle of co-parenting is effectively what it is.
Right. So zombies
heightened by the fact that people are trying to eat our brains and people around us are dying all the time.
Right. Exactly. So zombie apocalypse is the setting.
Right.
The other thing you mentioned, that's the story. And that's the interesting part.
Correct. And that's what makes
okay, great.
That's what makes it fascinating. And it's like you're watching people die. And that's a struggle, because it's like that person is going through or was helping with this other thing that the characters are dealing with. Like they're pivotal, not just to the survival, but to the actual inner relationships of these people. And so, it's not about world building, and it's not about that. And I guess what I'm saying is my opinion on writing what to the point of what your daughter's going through is like, you've lived a life, and later as you get older, you start to realize like all of the stuff you've gone through in the first 18, 20 years of your life, that's really where the gold is. Like, that's the stuff that you don't want to talk about that you should be talking about. And we've kind of beat the proverbial horse several times over this, but that's where you need to explore and talk about.
That's, I bring this up every once in a while, but I'm writing a collection of personal essays called The Paper Orchestra. And that is like, if you're fans of David Sedaris, who I love, this is my take on writing those kind of personal stories. And so that's what I do. I go into my past and I think of these little memories that I have, and I try to figure out what they're about and how to attach a story to it. And I was even telling my wife this morning, we went for a walk, and I told her, because it took about 2 years I'm not quite done yet, but it's about 2 years in this project to finish all these stories. And I told her how I'm different, how it's literally changed me. And I know it sounds cliche, but going to your past and trying to figure out these moments and to figure out what the meaning of these memories that I had. And like, because, you don't remember everything in your life. You only remember certain things. So why did you remember those things? There must be a reason.
Right. When
you can figure out what that reason is, it's like everything just kind of like falls into place. And it's just like, wow. And I told her, how it literally changed me. It made me as a person. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being cliche. I'm a different person now than I was before I started writing it. And part of it is just the sadness that I have, like how much I hurt myself in the past and how I hurt people I loved in the past.
Regret.
Yeah, regret and things that I've done and so that's why writing is such a wonderful, like, you can't do that. Like, all it's in you, it's in me, it's in you, it's in everyone who's listening. And if you can figure out how to do that, how to go into your past, you don't have to build any worlds. This is the world you already lived in. You know what I'm saying? It's all true. If you can figure out how to do that, how to remember an event of your life and figure out not what it's about, but what it's really, really about, and then write that, man, to me, that's way more interesting than people running from dinosaurs or superheroes. Just those little stories are just, to me, are wonderful, way with those character pieces, I guess,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd agree. And it does sound cliche, but I'd ask the question, why is it cliche? Why does it sound cliche? And I think it's because we've heard a lot of people say those things, and sometimes it feels disingenuous.
Right.
But Jordan Peterson, who's a kind of a renowned psychologist, and he has a saying that I think is very important. He says, if you want to teach someone critical thinking, teach them how to write. Right?
Yeah.
Right. Because you have to sit down and you have to put pen to paper or finger to keyboard, and you need to think through your thoughts. And it's this meditation process in and of itself where you have to really discern, is that something I actually believe? Does that actually feel true? And when you get it outside of yourself and you put it on paper, a lot of times you can look at the things you believed or thought were true and realize just how ridiculous they actually are, right? A lot of those thoughts that pop in our head about us and our worth, the struggles we went through, the lesson we learned because of something someone did to us when we were in third grade, or that girl who was mean to us, or that bully who picked on us. You start to just kind of analyze them from a different perspective because they're outside of you.
Yeah, I did a post just a few days ago. Basically, one of the most powerful things that I've learned in the past couple of years was this phrase, what lies are you telling yourself?
Yeah, and we've talked, past couple of podcasts, we've talked about that kind of in depth. And so if you haven't heard those, strongly encourage you to go back and listen to some of those episodes, because that's some really valuable stuff. And aside from the fun of talking about the industry and the craft of screenwriting, I think ultimately what you and I really align with and connect with, we've been friends. I consider you a mentor, and you were just kind of helping me out. And then I think we've kind of transitioned into friends because we both align on this perspective of we're just trying to make a better world and be better people in that world, and take care of people, and help people. And that process that we talk about in those episodes, I think really highlights that mutual bond that we share about daily personal introspection and improvement. That also happens to help us be better storytellers and do this thing that we love, and hopefully get paid for like you do. You get paid for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the good part for sure.
But what lies are you telling yourself? It's an important question.
Yeah, because and I mentioned this as well. It's like not what lies other people are telling you. Like that's what are you gonna do with that? But the lies you tell yourself are insidious because
Mhm.
you make so many decisions based on those lies. And then you get to a point in your life and like, wait a minute, like none of that's really true. I don't really like, I just told myself that stuff. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't really know that that's accurate. And even when I was writing chapters from this book that I'm working on, I read a paragraph or a page or whatever, and then I'd reread it later. I go, wait a minute, that doesn't really make sense. Like, how did I go from A to B? That doesn't make sense. I just said it. I just wrote it because it was the easy thing to write, but it doesn't really make sense. And then I go back and I have to unpack it, and I dig and I get to someplace a lot deeper and a lot closer to the truth. And that's that's where the change happens, and that's what's interesting. So
Yeah.
like stay away from cliches whenever you write. Just stay away from cliches. Uh, ugh, no good.
Right. Right. Well, coming back to, the main subject here of like, what are effectively some of these cliches that people are writing about writers and how they're portrayed? Do you feel like there's any other portrayals of writers and the craft of screenwriting that are kind of not exactly right?
I don't know about that. Like I watched the movie Being the Ricardos by Aaron Sorkin, which
Mhm.
I really liked. It's about, Desi and Lucille Ball. And he's brilliant. He's a wonderful writer. I was a little surprised though, and I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I was surprised by the way he depicted the female writer in that show, in the movie, kind of the way she talked to Lucille Ball. Like, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but on shows that I've worked on, like the writer, you don't in the writer, you don't want to get too close to the talent.
Yeah.
Like unless you're the showrunner. Usually, if you're smart, I always felt like the writer, you never want, if you're like a mid-level writer or a low-level writer, you don't want the star of the show to know your name. You just don't, because no good comes of it. Like at first you think you do, because, oh, this famous person knows my name. But then you find out, wait a minute, now they're pitching me story ideas. Now they want to use me as an ally against my boss. Like no good comes of it. So I always, I just remember, yeah, on a bunch of shows I worked on where like the star would learn my name early on. I was like, uh-oh,
Yeah, this is
this ain't
trouble.
good. So that was a little surprising. And I think people, yeah, that's another thing I think people might be surprised about. We don't, at least the people I know, we don't want we don't want the star to know who we are.
Yeah. I've noticed, I had a mentor very early on tell me that there's two types of people who are concerned with fame and people who are concerned with money. And, believe it or not, I think the people who are concerned with money are actually a little bit easier to trust than the people who are concerned with fame.
Wait, there's not a third part. It's either fame or money, and that's it.
I think so. What else are you concerned about, right? Like
Yeah, I guess you're right. I don't. The fame,
like think about it this way. Like, I'm here to do my job. I'm a professional, and the more professional I am and the better our craft is, the more I'm going to get paid. My incentive is to get paid as much as I can. Now you can stretch that and you could be a little, lascivious or malicious with that, and you could hurt people to make more money. But then there's the side of, I don't care about the money, I just want fame. And that is a little intangible. It's a little bit more, to me, feels like you're willing to do things that you're willing to bend the line of ethics and morals a little bit more to get ahead.
yeah, I just want to make money to provide for my family. That's all I
Right.
want. Even
Right.
doing this, and we talked about this before we started this venture, Phil. I was like, I'm not sure if I want people to know who I am.
Well, this is there was a hard thing for you for 5 years.
Yeah,
I
like
pushed
I'm
through
talking
this
about people. I'm talking about people on social media. I'm talking people who are listening to this podcast right now. I did not want you to know who I am. Yeah, so it's tricky.
And by the way, like, I point this out to people too, and we've luckily not, I only know of like one or two cases where people have kind of come at you and saying, oh, you're just some greedy Hollywood rich guy trying to make money selling a course.
Yeah.
And then I've had conversations with people where it's like, yeah, but that's actually not true, right? Because if you knew what it costs to produce the podcast and to produce the social media clips and to get the graphic designers, like, you're actually employing multiple people to do this thing. And your incentive, knowing you, is really because you want to publish a book, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the currency of publishers is following, it's people.
Yeah.
And so, you're exchanging your knowledge and understanding in exchange for a follow, which is free to everyone listening to this.
Yeah.
You're giving away way more value. And ultimately it's because you want to publish your book for self-expression.
Yeah.
It's not about the money at all.
And the funny, and Phil, the funny thing is like, I'm not going to make a lot of money from this book because books don't sell.
Right.
So I'm not doing it for the money.
Especially book of essays, right? Which is not like, it's not like you're going to win a New York Times bestseller off of the book.
Right.
Like it's really just, this is a personal passion project of yours. Right. And this is a medium through which you can do the thing that we both love, which is helping people. You're helping me every time we have a conversation. I know the feedback from the course is just outstanding. I mean, you got an email from a member of the course today thanking you for giving him the opportunity to buy the course, because he's now getting praised for the fact that if you take the jokes out of your sitcom, you have a drama here with real story. And that was this pain point his whole probably 10 years working as a writer like I have. Right.
Yeah, he's a sweet guy, Dave. He every few months he sends me a thank you letter. He bought the course a long time ago. He sends me a thank you.
He was number one. He literally number one. Bought it.
He was the number one.
Even available. Like you and I were shocked.
We were shocked. We just put it up. Right. And because every few months he sends me a thank you letter because he gets some other milestone in his journey towards becoming a writer. And it's very sweet of him. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
So I would just say, like, anyone who's interested in becoming a screenwriter or an actor or a director, you've got the watch list. We've got great content. You drop every single week on Fridays. It's 100% free. There's one email that goes out a week. You can unsubscribe anytime. It's not used for any other purpose, just to push out, here are 3 videos that you can meditate on and think about for the week. You've got the free course, which is, my opinion, the most valuable lesson in the entire course you're giving away for free, which is, here's what a story is. It's the definition of a story, right? You've got this podcast, you have the social media clips, not only the ones that are clips from the podcast, but you do your own every single day that you put out. Most of the time answering a question from someone you're following. And like, it's just a dearth, I don't know if that's the right word for this, but you have a dearth of information available to people for free. And all you're doing is asking them to follow. And I think that it would be a misuse of your time not to do that if you have any passion for the craft of writing or filmmaking, because you're going to give yourself the opportunity to have Michael interrupt your day with free valuable content to get your brain back on track. And just, so you're not thinking about Roblox or Fortnite or Call of Duty. You're getting back to the fact that this is what I really want in life, not the sedation I'm doing with video games or food or whatever else I'm doing. But I want to be a writer because that fills my soul. Yeah.
Go sign up. So if you want to sign up for that, people, that's at michaeljamin.com/watchlist. And that's what Phil's talking about. We send out, Phil, a weekly email about the top 3, videos that I think you should watch for actors or writers or creativity. And so, and that was actually your idea. And I think it's a great idea. People are already loving it. So go get on that. And it's free. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. I'm not going to spam you. It's only 1 email every Friday. That's it. Yeah. So,
and you got the free lesson, michaeljamin.com/free. You have the course, michaeljamin.com/course. And you got social media, Michael Jamin Writer. You're everywhere. Go follow him and get some professional writing in your life. I can't tell you how much I have conversations with people who've been working on breaking into the industry as long as I have, which is over a decade at this point. And the truth is, it all boils down to the fact that we are at a premium time where we have access to people like you who are working showrunners, who are not going to BS us and sell us some dream. You're going to be real with how difficult it is and what it actually takes to be a writer. And there's some freedom in understanding these are the limitations of the industry, and here is what I can now do to succeed in that industry.
Yeah. It doesn't help it doesn't help. You're not helping somebody if you're not honest with them. So, yeah.
Well, any other thoughts about the fallacies of screenwriters depicted on TV or film, or?
That's it. I'll think more. But as always, everybody, if you have a question, just leave it on social media, because I'm always looking for things to talk about. So go ahead and follow me and leave a question or somewhere.
Awesome, Michael. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, leave a review if you can. Do something that benefits you this week and moves you down your path to being a better screenwriter.
Yeah, do it up, everyone. Go get it.